Welcome, friends. This is the 2021 Photoshop 3 Notes for Animation. Today we're going to be talking about creating masks. The first thing to talk about with these, you won't be able to see it on my video recording, but just in person, you'll be able to see what I'm describing. So we have this lovely image, right? What if we just wanted to focus on Kora and Asami? Okay, just get rid of the background. But we don't want to delete it forever. We just want to hide that portion. We don't need it right now. So I could create what's called a mask, which will define for me a space where an image on a layer is visible, and wherever the mask otherwise says, it will hide the rest of that info. So if I move this mask away, image is still there. The mask just tells Photoshop what to show and when, right? So a mask, a layer effect that allows you to selectively make areas of a layer visible or invisible. Masks do not permanently delete any imagery, only hides it. So this goes back to what I was saying the other day. I don't teach you the eraser tool. This is the appropriate way to show and hide things as opposed to erasing them. A layer mask. How do we create a layer mask? This little icon that you can see here in the notes, that'll be at the bottom of your layers panel next to that plus sign, that trash can that we spoke about, so adding and deleting layers. So to create an empty layer mask, you just select the layer you want. You'll click Add Mask. It'll create a layer mask. You can click on it and brush in it. So this is the most basic way of making a mask. This is the so-called full manual way of making a mask. So if I zoom in on this here, if I have my layer here and I just click the Add Mask button, boom, you can see now in my layers panel there's just Pinhead Larry, but also there's this little white box added in there. Still just one layer, but that layer has two components, the layer and the layer mask. So now if I'm on my layer mask and I have my brush, I need to turn my opacity way up. Where's this? Okay. And then if I paint black on my mask, it will hide the imagery. And by the same token, if I paint white on the mask, it will return the imagery. So that's the basic way of making a mask. You just click this little button down here in the layers panel. That will add a layer mask, and then you can just click on the mask and paint black and white. Now notice over here, it'll be easier to see if I do this. So you can see my two active colors, red and blue. And if I click back over to my mask, you'll notice that my colors change back to black and white. And the reason why that is because your mask is grayscale information. Typically, you're going to paint mostly black and white, what's visible, what's not visible. But shades of gray do exactly what you would think. They make things partially visible. So if I just grab a gray here and start painting out here, it is technically kind of visible over here. In fact, let me pick a more visible gray, so you can see that that image is still kind of there. So, layer masks. That's the full manual version. Now, that method, brushing on your mask, that is typically what you're going to finish with. That will be your finishing touches, fix any of the mistakes that might have been made during your other stuff. You can do this assignment fully manually because it's very simple if you want to do that later. But typically you'll be using brushing on a mask to fix anything that might not have gone perfectly in your first pass for your mask. And when you're making a mask, typically you'll make your first pass with some kind of selection tool. And so that's what the next 2 days are going to be about. Today we're learning about the basics of masking. Tomorrow we're going to discuss another advanced selection tool called the pen tool. Pen tool just does what we're talking about today, but it is like the bodybuilder, like Giga Chad version of these tools. So Next set of tools, I'm going to come back to deselect in a second, are our marquee tools. So our marquee tools allow us to make a selection in a particular shape. Rectangular and elliptical, just meaning round. So these are up here, excuse me, up here, just beneath your move tool. The default one being the rectangular marquee. If you make a rectangular selection and press the mask button, it will mask that shape. If you want to keep it in proportion, you hold shift and then it'll make a perfect square. Similar concept for the elliptical marquee tool. And this is where I want to point out on these notes here. You're going to see this for the marquee tool and the lasso tool, but this applies to many other tools in Photoshop. If a tool has more than one tool nested underneath that tool, in this case there are multiple versions of a marquee tool, multiple versions of a lasso tool. These tools can be cycled through by tapping shift in whatever the key is. So shift L, shift M, whatever. So I can switch from my elliptical marquee tool, either going up here and just clicking and switching to elliptical marquee, or I could press shift M and that will cycle between rectangular and elliptical. Same concept, if I hold shift on the elliptical, it will make a perfect circle. If I don't though, it makes an oval selection. And again, I'm just making the selection and then just hitting this mask button down here. That is one of the next questions, which I'll skip down to right down here. So these are our most basic selection tools, the marquee tool, the rectangular marquee, and this elliptical marquee. So if you are using selections for your masking, make sure, using your choice of tool method, you'll make your selection. So I just showed you one method. Double check. You are an operator. Be smarter than the tools you use. Did you select the right layer in the layer panel? I still do this to this day. Make sure you're on the right thing. Click mask icon to convert your active selection to a mask. Note, selection to mask conversion leaves area inside the selection revealed. So that's what's happening here. I made a elliptical marquee. Press this button. Whatever was inside the circle remains. Whatever's outside, you can see, automatically gets filled with black if you look at my icon there. So these are all well and good though, but not what we're trying to do. So that selection there, I don't want it. Command D as in deselect. Now it's gone. Cool. Okay. Back up here to these. So let's take a quick pause before I get into these more advanced selection tools. Masking as a concept. Questions on that? Again, either manually with a brush or with a selection. Does it at least conceptually make sense what we're trying to do? We're blocking things out on our layers. Okay. Here are the fancier ways to do this. So, our lasso tool. The regular lasso tool is not super useful. So the basic lasso tool is manually click and drag to draw an area of selection by hand. So if I were trying to mask Patrick out of this background and I press L for the lasso, so I'm on my regular lasso tool, and you can see I'm doing my best to try and trace the lad here. Oh. Okay, so that is the selection that I made with the manual lasso. So, again, entirely freehand selection tool. There it is. That's the lasso tool. So it's okay. You know, you'll find uses for it, but Command D as in deselect to remove my selection. So I'm going to press Shift L, and that's going to move me over to my polygonal lasso tool. Polygonal lasso tool is connect the dots. Clicking places a point and connects to the next point in the line until it connects back to the starting point. Boom. So this is just going to create a bunch of straight lines. If I go back here, I'll again start at his bolo tie, draw a line to his ear, line here, line there, do a line to here, line to here, line to here, line to here. Okay. So this is just, again, drawing straight lines between points. This will be very much like the tool that we learned tomorrow called the pen tool. Except the pen tool is actually goated. Okay, so there is my selection made with the polygonal lasso tool. Actually, it turned out pretty damn good, but I was much more steady about it this time. So again, you can see, not perfect. There's some blue out there and such, but pretty good. Again, polygonal lasso tool. And you folks may want to use these tablet pens later. Next thing. So, lasso tool is fully manual. Polygonal lasso tool, there's some training wheels on that, let's say. The magnetic lasso is borderline full automatic. Okay? Click and drag. Photoshop will look at the color and the contrast of your image and try and figure out what it is that you're trying to select. So I'm going to press Shift L one more time. I'm on the magnetic lasso tool. Whoops. Hold on. There we go. Oh. There we go. Hitting enter will lock in your tools. Okay, so I'm going to drag along the outline of Patrick here. Pinhead Larry, excuse me. Okay. And this is a very small pixelated image. The higher quality your image, the easier this will be on Photoshop and the cleaner your result will come out too. There we go. So that's my selection with the magnetic lasso. Arguably my polygonal lasso one came out better this time. But again, Photoshop was looking and noticing, hey, this guy's pink, it's very bright, background's blue, kind of darker. So it's able to figure out the lines within reason. So it's not perfect. And so this goes back to what I was saying a moment ago. Mostly these selection tools will be pretty good. That gets you pretty good. Then you just go in with the brush, fix up the edges, and you're done. So that brings us to the last two new tools for today. I know I'm throwing a lot at you. Again, the main concept is, can you make a mask? And, can you use multiple methods to make that mask? I actually am going to throw this in there. I'm not done with it. I was actually working on it, so the outlines are a little messed up. Okay, we're creating Photoshop masks because masking is a critical method to image editing. We're covering these notes. If you finish our assignment later, make sure you got your Photoshop 2 memes done so I can collect those tomorrow. Okay. So back to this. So our last tool in our toolbox for today for making selections. So I'm going to undo. All right, so this tool underneath the lasso tool is the quick selection tool. And you'll see it looks a lot like a brush. It works like a brush. It's got a circle tip. And it does the similar thing as the magnetic lasso, where it looks at colors as you brush over them and tries to find similar contiguous pixels that it can keep selecting. So that was me quick selecting the head. You'll see, pretty jagged, but you can just go around this with the brush tool and smooth it out. So the quick select wand, very similar to what I was just showing you with the magnetic lasso. It just operates like a brush, so you can just paint over things. Magnetic lasso is more about circling the outline, right? And I only show this because sometimes you have to go back to the old ways. But the last one on here is the magic wand tool. As I call it, the racist uncle tool, because you have to instruct it how tolerant this tool should be. Okay, so like many of us have people in our family who would like to encourage them to be more tolerant. Not necessarily my uncles. My uncles are pretty chill. Okay. Magic wand. If you press Shift W, so that's underneath that. Go ahead and undo. Boom. And so right now up here, you'll see my tolerance is set to 50. That is very high. I'm going to take this down to 10. And you'll see when I try and click on his face, even though it looks like it's all the same pink, according to Photoshop, many of these pixels in here are not close enough in color value for it to recognize it on the magic wand. So, again, sometimes you may need to use this. I expect that none of you will really need to do this, but it's one of those things. So if I wanted to try that again, my tolerance is set to 80. Tolerance set to 80. Oh, it worked pretty good. I forgot to click on the eyes and the mouth, but it looks okay. You can see the outline. It's not too bad. Okay, it is still pretty jagged, though. And so as our final review on this stuff, scrolling down, when we are editing our layer mask, as I said, you might use a selection tool to start your layer mask. And then if you're going to go in, use your brush, clean up the edges, what have you. Make sure that you are clicking on the correct thumbnail in the layer panel. Easy mistake to make, folks. Make sure you are clicked on the mask when you have a mask. So if I wanted to fix these eyes, I need to make sure I'm on my layer. And again, you'll be able to figure it out. You can't paint color on a mask. So right now I have colors in my color palette here. That tells me I'm not selected on my layer mask. Click on my layer mask. You'll see my colors change into grayscale colors. I'm going to hit D as in default for my default colors. I have my brush tool. Make it small. I have brush tool on white. And white allows me to brush in the mouth here on the mask. And it's the same thing if I brush white out here. It would bring the mask back here. If I paint black, it will remove from the mask. So that's our final note. When you are on the layer mask, your brush only uses grayscale colors. What do the colors white and black represent? White, visible, black, hidden. White, visible, black, hidden. That's the end-all be-all of today's lesson. Make a mask from that masking button. Brush in white, leaves it be. Brush in black, hides it. So, to bring an area back to visible, simply paint white onto that area of the mask. This happened last period too, folks. Be careful you're not erasing. People got confused because they were using the eraser on their mask. Erasing on a mask will erase black and leave it white. It'll make things visible. Don't use the eraser, use the brush. So, how might we do this? Let me restart this. So, here we have this wonderful image here, Pinhead Larry. You're going to be working on both Pinhead Larry and Mr. Dirty Dan. Both of these characters should remain, and you should be getting rid of the blue background behind them. So your character should remain, the background should be hidden. And so, if I just add a mask here, I could just use my brush and manually do this if I were so inclined that way. If that's how I wanted to do my work today, sure. So I could go in and start getting this. And you want it to be quite close. I am not going to accept lazy work. So then I would need to come in here, grab my brush, make this a little smaller, bring back this outline here. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to look like you tried to make it look good. I'm sure some of you will try and walk a tight line between that, so, you know, your mileage may vary. I might very well tell you do it again, or tighten it up. So like this is pretty good. This is acceptable. It's not all the blue's gone, but most of it is. The outline is pretty much there. I don't want to see unoutlined, right? So that's one method. The other method, of course, delete my layer mask. You could use your quick selection brush and select this. But again, it's not super good about getting the outlines. So once you make this mask, you're going to have to go back in with the brush, bring in the outlines on these folks. That's one method. And then the other method, of course, would be to use either, probably your magnetic lasso and trace all the way around this fellow. I think you are going to find similar issue, though, is that the magnetic lasso is not super keen on getting the outlines. So here, I'm just going to do this. Yeah, and again, you'll see it's not super keen on getting the outlines. So you'll just have to use your brush on the mask, fix those areas up, right? Whoops. Again, for my game design students from last year, you're doing these two with the pen tool, Gwen and Viego with the pen tool. Tomorrow, you folks will be doing Viego with the pen tool. We'll be talking about that with tomorrow's lesson. But for today's lessons for my new kids, these two, and you want to leave it so that the characters remain, backgrounds are gone. And we will submit this tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll see the assignment up. So you folks have the rest of today's 2 periods to work on this. There's not a ton of time left in this period, but some. And then, next period. And then also, folks, going back to my when you're done with this, tomorrow I'm hoping to collect those Photoshop 2 memes from you folks so that we can vote on those this week. So please, if you haven't already finished your Photoshop 2 and submitted Photoshop 1 and 2, but also your memes, if you did a meme for Photoshop 2, please make sure those are ready to go. All right. So let me stop